President Trump's fond farewell to his most reliable ally in the U.S. Senate, Lindsey Graham, plus the documentary filmmaker who has spent years witnessing Graham's unique clout at home and abroad. Trump meets with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, countries Graham championed. With Trump, both face pivotal war front decisions. Ro Khanna, Silicon Valley's Democratic congressman in Pennsylvania, with an economic patriotism speech that looks a lot like a prelude to 2028. He joins us. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout.
For more than 30 years, nothing of consequence happened in this Capitol without Lindsey Graham knowing about it. Nothing of significance happened anywhere in the world without Lindsey Graham having a view on it. And no bill became law in the most exceptional republic in human history without Lindsey Graham having a say in it.
This is pure coincidence, but the late Lindsey Graham, whom, as you just heard, the nation, led by President Trump, bid farewell to today, shares something in common with this show. Neither took or take themselves too seriously. Senator Graham knew politics was a game, and he played that game with relish that was both effective and self-aware. He readily admitted that he was on TV a lot, maybe too much, and that he had to be in every room where a deal was being cut, because that was where the fun of politics and power could be found. Graham was what you might call a D.C. gangster. He was in every bipartisan gang that gathered to tackle a problem. That led Graham in many different ideological directions. And for all his Trumpian attributes now, there were times in South Carolina when conservative Republicans branded him a squishy liberal. Trust me, they tried, but they never could beat him. Graham could and would make fun of himself, acknowledging that much of his political life was lived as a sort of cheerful sidekick to more powerful men. First, Arizona Republican Senator John McCain, then later, of course, Donald Trump. But Graham evolved from that derivative approach to politics. With the benefits of seniority and the clout that came with it, Graham became his own force in the Senate and in national politics. And that is one of the reasons his sudden death hit Washington so hard. Graham, you see, had grown. He amassed power, but exercised it with a kind of aw-shucks joy that drew people closer, Republicans and Democrats. Graham's career, importantly, tracked two intertwined Republican revolutions. The first was the so-called Gingrich Revolution of 1994, the year Graham was first elected to the House, as part of the first GOP majority in that body in 40 years. There was a whiff of populism in that GOP power surge. Term limits, welfare reform, streamlining the federal bureaucracy, ending unfunded mandates on the states, the line item veto, small measures to tame DC's concentrated vortex of power. That second revolution was the Trump one that transformed the Republican Party. Gingrich, who had aged by then into a backroom party elder, was one of the few who understood the first revolution. After all, he led it, and who helped shape the second revolution, that more deeply populist, tariff-heavy, anti-immigration, white working-class agenda Trump rode not once, but twice to the White House. Gingrich and Graham never lost touch. Graham, we should remember, was harshly critical of Trump at first. Then he came on board, and in so doing became the great Senate Trump whisperer, so much so that it was Trump who delivered the eulogy.
Lindsey and I did not exactly get off to the best of starts. Running against each other, back in 2016, Lindsey said something rather nasty on his flight to becoming the next president of the United States. So naturally, I did something that I shouldn't have done. I shared his personal cell phone number with the millions of people that happened to be watching that particular day as I made a speech, a very important speech. And I remember the number 202-228-0292, if anybody wants to give it a shot. His phone exploded. He said, I had that number for 20 years. His phone totally, I don't know what he did with it, but it exploded. That was the beginning of a friendship in a way. But it was Lindsey who had the last laugh, because while I blew up his phone all for one day, we became great friends, and Lindsey did not stop calling me for the next 10 years.
Nicole Killian joins us now from outside the National Cathedral, where the ceremony honoring Graham's life just concluded. Nicole?
Yeah, and it certainly was a very emotional service. There were moments of levity, like when the president told that story about giving away Senator Graham's phone number. He also called him a tough cookie and kind of went off script for a bit because this was very personal for him. As you know, he was one of the last people to talk to the late senator before his passing. And so you could kind of tell that he was still sort of grappling with the fact that he is no longer here. And that also was the sense earlier today as well at a ceremony at the U.S. Capitol, and having walked the halls of Capitol Hill, many people are still trying to process the loss of Lindsey Graham because he was just everywhere all the time. And, not seeing him in the halls of Congress, not getting those phone calls, that the president used to receive from him is very difficult for a lot of folks. And certainly this cathedral behind me was packed with individuals. In addition to the former president, we also heard from Sean Hannity, the Fox News host, who knew him professionally, but also became very close friends with him. We also heard a very emotional tribute from the late senator's niece, who is the daughter of Darlene Graham, who is now the senator representing South Carolina, succeeding her late brother temporarily, although she is now running for his seat for a full term. But she talked about the importance of Senator Graham as a family man, as someone who was there for her in very difficult times. That is something her mother, Darlene Graham, also shared quite a bit ahead of this service once she was appointed as U.S. Senator in terms of losing her brother, given the close bond that they shared. But there were a number of dignitaries here, as you know, Major, everyone from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who met with Lindsey Graham just one day before his passing as he was trying to move forward this Russia sanctions package. We also saw Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, the late senator was a champion of Israel and very supportive of our key ally. And of course, in addition to a number of senators and lawmakers who were here, there were a number of administration officials here, past and present, including former Vice President Mike Pence, who came into the U.S. Congress not long after that Republican revolution that you mentioned. He talked about how he looked up to the late Senator Lindsey Graham when he first joined the U.S. Congress, when Senator Graham was then a member of the House of Representatives. Take a listen to what the former vice president told me about their relationship and the legacy that Senator Graham now leaves behind.
It's impossible to talk about or remember Lindsey Graham without remembering that sense of humor. But while that may be what I miss the most, his leadership, particularly for America on the world stage, will be missed. But I am heartened that even tonight the United States Senate will take up the Lindsey Graham Russia sanctions bill as a testament to him, but also an ongoing testament to his leadership.
And that is what the former vice president said will be the senator's legacy as the Senate now moves forward with that legislation, that Russia sanctions package that Senator Graham pushed so vigorously for in the days leading up to his death. Major.
Nicole Killian at the National Cathedral, thank you so very much. Later this hour, I will speak with filmmaker Alex Holder, who spent the last few years following Lindsey Graham very closely and documenting his efforts in the Senate. We'll show you some of Alex's really interesting behind-the-scenes footage. Before delivering Graham's eulogy, President Trump met separately with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. CBS News senior White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins me now. Nancy, let's go with the first meeting, Zelenskyy.
Zelenskyy, so after that meeting took place, and of course the Ukraine war was front and center in that conversation, Zelenskyy said something interesting. He said that he and President Trump had a great meeting and that they talked a lot about diplomacy and that the need to reinvigorate the diplomatic process. It's been several months, at least, since President Trump made a full court push for one-on-one talks between Zelensky and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, and certainly not three-way talks between those two men and President Trump. And Zelensky seemed to be signaling that he is ready for something like that, especially at a time where he feels that he has notched a few important wins, including being granted approval by President Trump recently for licenses to build his own Patriot interceptor system, something he had been seeking for quite some time, and launching drone attacks that have been ranging farther and farther into Russian territory. This was Zelensky sending a message to the world that his relationship with President Trump after a rocky start about a year and a half ago is growing stronger, and that he feels it may be time to sit down with the Russian president.
I'm familiar with sometimes harsh winds on the North Lawn. They are swirling around Nancy Cordes, and she is gamely moving through them. Well done, as always, Nancy. And what do we know, if anything, about the Netanyahu meeting?
So we haven't gotten a readout from the White House yet, but Netanyahu himself posted a video on social media saying that it was one of the best meetings he's ever had with President Trump. He's clearly looking to send a message to not just international observers, but also his own population, that he has smoothed things over with President Trump after Trump argued that he and Netanyahu were at odds over strategy, over tactics, that he felt that Netanyahu was going after Hezbollah too fiercely. So Netanyahu saying that the meeting went well, but right before that meeting took place, Major, President Trump was doing a phone interview, and he was asked about these claims that Netanyahu has made that the Iranians are trying to reconstitute their nuclear program underneath what's known as Pickaxe Mountain in Iran, even as Trump continues to talk about negotiations over the nuclear program. And President Trump got kind of irritated at a mention of that. He said, yeah, I wish he wouldn't talk about that. He's only doing that because he wants me to stay in the fight, which was a sort of a signal of what has been a central conflict between these two men as we move into the 6th month of this war. President Trump feeling sometimes like Netanyahu wants to stay involved more than he does.
Nancy Cordes, North Lawn of the White House. Thank you so very much. CBS News national security analyst Aaron McClain joins me now. He's also the host of the most excellent School of War podcast. Aaron, sometimes we're very granular here, and we'll get to some granularity in a second, but big picture, this is 2 meetings, same day, 2 fronts. Lots of things are going to happen in the next month or 2 in both places. It seems to me that could be pivotal.
That's right. And the 2 wars are actually connected and across a surprising number of junctures. You saw the Ukrainians took a shot at a Russian ship in the Caspian Sea that was transporting military equipment between Russia and Iran just a few days ago. So these 2 things are interconnected. These 2 meetings were likely very significant. We'll learn more about what was actually discussed in them in the days to come. Vladimir Zelensky pushing on an increasingly open door of warm relations with President Trump. Benjamin Netanyahu trying to shore things up. There are real disagreements over strategy between the United States and Israel right now. He has to heal that, as Nancy pointed out, not only for strategic reasons, but his own political reasons.
And when you say Volodymyr Zelensky is pushing against an open door, you perceive that Trump and the administration writ large now see Ukraine as a potential winner, which they did not earlier.
Donald Trump likes winners. That's one thing that we know about him. He likes to associate himself with winners. He does not like to associate himself with
he does not.
difficult causes in the international system. And right now, Zelensky's had a good few months. I think that contributes a great deal to the warmth that we're seeing. This bill that's under consideration with the Senate tonight, named for Senator Graham, the Russia sanctions bill that's going to get a procedural vote, this is actually a very big deal for Ukraine. And what it does is it helps Ukraine achieve something that it needed to in its policy to the United States, get America to apply more pressure to Russia and not on Ukraine to get to a deal.
So the president, as Nancy pointed out on a Fox and Friends phone interview today, said, Bibi doesn't need to tell me about Pickaxe Mountain. What is he doing that for? He can tell me privately. What is he pressuring me for? Saying out loud the thing that we know is going on privately, this tension between Netanyahu and Trump about how far to go and in what direction?
That's right. I mean, the Israelis have been pretty consistent from the start of this that regime change is their goal. Ending the Iranian nuclear program is their goal. President Trump has also at various points enunciated both things as American goals, but you can just see from the situation that we're in that he has got some reluctance about escalating further. And he would like, as ever, a deal. The problem is as of right now, I do not see any conditions for a deal. Nothing is different fundamentally than it was before this most recent round of escalation between the two countries. And I fear, Major, that kind of what you see is what you get, this stalemated situation. It may just continue for some time.
And that stalemated situation means that the war continues, goes unresolved, and we still have destabilization in oil markets, which means prices, which means more political pressure.
That's right. And even though things are relatively quiet compared to how they've been the last couple of weeks, yesterday was a pretty big day in the Gulf. The Saudis got attacked by drones from Iranian proxies based in Iraq. The Houthis announced that they took shots at the Saudi pipeline, or at least energy assets tied to getting Saudi oil out west to the Red Sea. Like, that's a difficult set of
These are not conflagrations, but they are warning signs.
And they are very significant. They are very significant for the energy market question that you raised.
Aaron McLean, great stuff as always. Thank you so much. Still to come on the Takeout, California Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna. We will discuss his, quote, new economic patriotism tour. What's it about? Is it about White House 2028? Also, a powerful earthquake in Japan collapses a mall and traps people within the rubble. The latest on search and rescue operations there. Plus, former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu to discuss a new YouTube series he is a part of on the political trajectory of the American South. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. California Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna is beginning what he is calling the new economic patriotism tour, doing so tonight in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is suburban Philadelphia, in part marking America's 250th anniversary. And the congressman joins us now. Congressman, always good to see you. Distill for my audience what economic patriotism means to you.
It means we cannot have a country where you have $20 trillion in my Silicon Valley district in the hands of a few, while the vast majority of Americans are struggling and have not achieved the American dream. Economic patriotism is a call for a Marshall Plan for America, an economic plan for the success of communities that were hollowed out with deindustrialization, that were hollowed out because of the decline of unions. It calls for an industrial investment bank, for 1,000 new trade schools, for new tech institutes everywhere, for venture capital to be distributed, and for a strong care economy.
So when you talk about those multitudes of trillionaires in your district, that means taking wealth from them. How?
It means taxing them. I mean, we would raise $4 trillion if we had a 5% tax on 900 billionaires in this country. We're not talking about the 1%. We're not talking about the 0.1%. We're not talking about the 0.01%. We're talking about the 0.001%. Tax them at 5% on their net worth, and you could fund a economic renaissance in this country. You could have free childcare. You could have free public college. You could have this industrial investment bank I talked about. You could build more housing. You could have a home program for people under 35. If you work hard 7 years, we'll give you zero down payment and low interest loans, the same thing we give our veterans. But I'm back in Bucks County because the place I grew up, where there was so much economic shared success, has seen stagnation. You saw Fearless Works when I was growing up be bankrupt. There was the steel plant in Lower Bucks. And it's just not right that the kids I grew up with, families I grew up with, don't feel like their kids, their grandkids are going to have economic independence, and yet all this wealth in Silicon Valley. And I want to return to say, here's how we build wealth for all Americans across this country.
Congressman, politics is the art of contrast. So what is the contrast you see with your agenda and the Trump tariff agenda and the Trump tax agenda?
So let me give the Trump voters some credit. They were right that places in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Ohio got screwed and shafted.
We should have never watched Johnstown be hollowed out. We should have never watched Fearless Works in my hometown of Bucks County shut down, and the steel leave, the auto industry leave, the aluminum leave. And we abandoned a lot of these communities. And Trump came in and he said he was going to bring back these manufacturing jobs. Well, we're going up to Erie, Pennsylvania, where he promised manufacturing jobs coming back, but those manufacturing jobs have actually declined, and they've been declined across the country. Why is that? Because he has just had blanket tariffs. Those tariffs, by the way, have also been on intermediate tools and machines that we actually need for reindustrialization in this country. And he has not invested in trade schools. He has not invested in an industrial bank, which would actually fund small and medium-sized manufacturers. He has not actually invested in community projects in this country. So from Hamilton to Lincoln to FDR, you need government investment and industrial policy to build new jobs. And so what I would say is he's gotten the diagnosis correct, but the solutions are all wrong.
What about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security? You keep that?
Yes, keep no tax on tips, keep no tax on overtime, but and keep no tax on Social Security. But let's go much further. Let's actually pay people a living wage and move a living wage by 2032 to $25 an hour. Let's actually support unions so workers can bargain and actually get ownership, some piece of ownership in an economy. You know, most of the wealth generation, Major, you know this, has been because of the 20,000% increase in the stock market. We need workers to actually have ownership. And let's expand Social Security. It's not enough for our seniors. And you can do that by scrapping the cap and taxing people over $400,000 on Social Security.
Let me shift your focus, Congressman. What happened to you in the West Bank? What does it represent about the Israeli government? And do you honestly believe U.S. officials should arrest Benjamin Netanyahu in this country?
Let me just be very factual about what happened to us, because there's some misinformation. I've been to Israel 3 times, Major. I've met with Prime Minister Bennett. I met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I had been there with Speaker Pelosi, with the Armed Services Committee. I wanted to go on a Palestinian-led tour to see the West Bank from the eyes of those Palestinians who have been occupied. And I informed the Israeli embassy, I informed the American embassy while we were at Zenuta Village, a village, by the way, where other members of Congress have actually been just months ago. We saw extreme settlers. They blocked our van. They didn't let us exit. They brandished M4 weapons, made in America M4 weapons. And about 30 minutes this went on. They were videotaping us, laughing at us. Then the IDF comes and they take the side of the settlers, saying we have to stay there. We finally call a very senior person of the American embassy who was very helpful, called the Israeli police, and we left without incident. But this should not be happening, not just to an American delegation. It should not be happening to Palestinians. And it was a brutal look at the settler violence that Palestinians face every day. I believe in an end to the occupation. I believe the American government should recognize a Palestinian state, put an embassy, consular services in Ramallah or East Jerusalem. Many other countries, France, Spain, UK, have done that. Now, my view on Netanyahu is the same as my view on Putin. If you have a warrant for your arrest by the ICC and you're coming here, not to the UN, because the UN has its own rules, but you're coming to the United States, then you should be arrested. We should not allow people in our jurisdiction who have an arrest warrant by the ICC. People say, what about Americans? They don't have any American arrest warrants. I mean, this is not talking about Americans who are subject to our own law. But that seems to be a consistent principle of international law, and I'd apply it to Putin like I'd apply it to Netanyahu.
Before I let you go, when are you going to announce your bid for the presidency in 2028?
Well, Major, maybe if I were to do it, I'd do it on your show. Let's see. But here's what I do know. I understand the future of this economy. I've seen it in Silicon Valley, and I know it's only working for very few tech billionaires, and that's not the America I grew up in. I want it to work for the kids and families who I grew up with and to work for every American. And whether I run or whether I offer an economic platform for how we create success for every American in a future economy, I'm increasingly convinced I have something to offer this country in terms of our future.
Let it be recorded, ladies and gentlemen, that Ro Khanna was an early adopter of the takeout. Let's just put that on the record. Congressman, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you. Coming up, after a long legal battle, the audio tapes of former President Biden have been released. We will hear a clip that may explain why a special counsel report described him as a, quote, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for being with us. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Search and rescue efforts are underway after a powerful earthquake struck southern Japan today. Crews are working to rescue people trapped inside a shopping mall, which roof has collapsed. Officials have urged roughly 300,000 people to evacuate. Thousands are without power. Death toll unclear. The Justice Department has released 70 hours of audio recordings of former President Biden and his ghostwriter. These recordings are of the two writing Biden's 2017 memoir, Promise Me, Dad. They were at the center of special counsel Robert Hur's investigation into Biden's handling or possible mishandling of classified documents. In 2024, Hur declined to bring charges against Biden, saying a jury would view him as, quote, a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Here's one instance where Biden quite clearly lost his train of thought.
All right. What was I going to ask you? Something else. Oh, gosh. I can't think what it is.
At the time of Hur's report, Biden said he had not shared classified information and no classified material was ever alleged to be in the book. However, in the tapes, we hear Biden acknowledge that some information he was sharing might well have been classified.
Some of this may be classified, so be careful with it. I'm not sure. It's not more classified, but...
A statement from a Biden spokesperson in part calls the release of the tapes, quote, the latest example of this administration weaponizing the DOJ for political retribution, unquote. Democrats may be well positioned to win back the House and Senate, but a rise within the party of progressives has, in some ways, created tensions, maybe even a split. In a new book titled Nothing Left, Confessions of a Democratic Operative, Evan Barker speaks out against the direction some in her party have taken. Here is part of our conversation. So the book has a then and then quality. Then, the first then, progressive Democratic fundraiser. Then 2024 Trump voter. I'm curious about the now, Evan. How do you look at politics now?
You know, at this point, I would identify my political affiliation as just being an independent. There are some issues that I probably still lean a little bit to the left on, such as healthcare. But when it comes to immigration and a lot of social issues, I'm definitely more to the right now. And I think that I actually represent what many Americans feel in this country.
And in the book, you write about how motherhood affected you in looking at some issues in a different way. Walk my audience through that.
Yeah, so I saw inside the progressive movement a lot of demonization towards men, especially. It was almost like a daily occurrence at some point in time to just hear like a bashing of men. And I had my son, and I realized, like, I have this little precious innocent boy, and everyone loves him now, but what happens when he grows up? And then there was also the fact that I started paying attention more to the messages that were in children's books and in children's spaces, particularly around gender identity. And my eyes really opened to that issue as well. And I think it made me a little bit more conservative.
And what did you see happening in that messaging? And if you have any recollection of something specific, I'd like you to share that.
Well, I remember going to a children's museum in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I grew up in Missouri, and I moved to the Bay Area a few years ago. And I went to a children's museum there, and they were doing like gay pride at the children's museum, and there was a drag queen performer, and just books that were marketed to tiny kids, like 2 and 3 years old, that were explaining different pronouns to them. And it felt incredibly confusing, and it felt like it was done intentionally. And I felt like, you know, it's wrong, like it's very confusing to children. So that was part of my evolution, for sure.
And as I read the book, that experience viewed through the eyes of a mother with a newborn baby boy linked with what you heard on Zoom calls, what you heard in conversations, the sort of dialogue that was not only frequent, but hardening within the progressive movement, if I have it right.
It was constant. It was like a daily bashing. You know, even men had to participate in it, even though oftentimes they would confide to me privately that they didn't really like the rhetoric, but they would be forced to sort of perform and virtue signal on these calls as a self-protection mechanism to be able to keep their jobs. And, you know, I would hear like females say men should be bullied in school more because it will lower their confidence and it'll make them grow up and they'll be less confident and they won't be so hard towards women, and all like just very ugly stuff. And it really, my perspective shifted so much when I became a mom.
So when you think about progressivism in America right now and the conflicts that are going on within the Democratic Party between Democratic Socialists of America, how do you see it, and what do you foresee coming of that, based on your experience as a fundraiser and someone deeply connected into this world?
It's not surprising to me at all that the DSA wing of the party is rising so rapidly right now. You know, I started working in the movement back in 2018, and back then people were pretty disorganized. They weren't very professionalized. They didn't know how to work with outside money. And now all of that has changed. They have a decade of experience. They've recruited their own donors. They're very professional. They're almost just as professional as the establishment, to be honest. In many ways, I think are becoming the new establishment of the Democratic Party. But I think it's a disastrous path for Democrats. I don't see them being able to compete in national elections and being able to win over people like my family in the Midwest if they're championing policies like abolishing ICE and defund the police. And I just saw yesterday that James Tallarico is now running on reparations in Texas, which is another 80-20 issue. And I think that they're going down a bad path, and it's like they did not learn the lessons from 2024.
You can listen to my full conversation with Evan Barker on your favorite podcast platform. Up next, the American South and its impact on politics. It's being studied by political scientists since the late 60s. Former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu knows a thing about the South, and he'll join us to discuss his new YouTube show, Long Play. That's next on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. A new YouTube series is pulling back the curtain, or at least it's trying to, on what we might regard as the political complexities of the American South. It's called Long Play, Winning the South, and it explores the importance of 6 states through people who have moved to shape them and have attitudes about what's going on there. Here's a sneak peek.
The South is the political epicenter of the country. Democrats are way on their heels in this region, but Republicans are going through their own reckoning in the South, too.
I think that's right.
It's the fastest growing region in every age group.
That's because we're just more fun than everybody else in the country.
Joining me now, one of the show's co-hosts, former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu. He's also a former Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana and a former senior advisor to President Biden. A lot of formers there. Mitch, it's good to have you here. Forgive me for saying so, but this is like the biggest duh in American politics. The South matters, and Democrats ought to pay attention.
No, there's no question about that, and I think that's happening right now. You know, the South is just a very interesting place now. Lots of people are moving from around the country, from the Northeast, from the West Coast, from Ohio down to North Carolina, down to Georgia. It's mixing things up a lot. You see a lot of people moving into Texas, and you see it starting to affect the culture, the music, and of course the politics. So we wanted to kind of just do a deep dive. So it's really been exciting. We've been to Georgia. We've been in North Carolina. I was just in Texas with Tallarico on the border in Laredo. And today we're in Tennessee. As a matter of fact, I just left Hernando's Hideaway, which is where Elvis Presley performed. It's just been very interesting. We're talking to a lot of folks. It's a lot of fun.
So what do you think is happening in the South? Because that soundbite said two things that I believe you fundamentally accept. One, Republicans are ahead but have a reckoning, and Democrats are way, way back on their heels. Why are those two things true now?
Both of those things are true, and both of those things are in motion. And if you're on the ground, you can feel it. We kind of look through the lens of politics on national, shows all the time. But if you're on the ground down here and you're thinking about culture, you're thinking about race, you're thinking about demographic trends, where people are moving, what communities they're moving to, you see things shifting and changing. Like North Carolina and Georgia, for example, politically, are trending purple. They may not be trending blue, but they're definitely trending away from hard red. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. You see this thing in Texas going on, which is very interesting. And it's all falling in the midst of the Trump presidency, which is providing either unique opportunities or unique headaches for people and the way that they've been seeing things for the last year and a half. So we're just on the ground with real people. We're talking to ex-politicians. We're talking to folks that are in political office right now. And it has just been a really interesting swing that I think people would be really exciting to watch. It's all on YouTube. It's all free. Go take a look at it. It's only about 20 minutes long for each episode.
You mentioned North Carolina and Georgia, and yet Trump won them both easily in 2024.
Yeah, that's true. But we also have two Democratic senators in Georgia for the first time in a long time. And then in North Carolina, which has not had a Democratic senator in the last 18 years, they're about to elect Roy Cooper. And so you see that swinging. Also, what's really weird is in some of the southern states, North Carolina particularly, even though the Republicans have won the presidency and the Senate races, Democrats are winning some of the down ballot races, governors and attorney generals. North Carolina particularly shows that. In Texas, you have people that are really starting to warm up to the Tallarico candidacy against Ken Paxton. It may be because this is a unique time. It may be because of who the two candidates are. But people who are very heavy pro-Trump supporters, even on immigration, are now tired of kind of the way that they're implementing that. Same thing with cost. So, who knows? I mean, it's just a very interesting time, but things are very fluid down here.
So I'm curious, Mitch, if you have any curiosity about Missouri. I grew up in Southern California, but I went to the University of Missouri. Sometimes I'm inordinately blamed for caring about Missouri, but here's why I raise it. 2018, Missouri by initiative overturned a right-to-work law. In 2020, it expanded Medicaid, also through initiative. In 2024, also through initiative, it created abortion rights, all while electing Republicans nationwide. Something is interesting in Missouri that is unusual that you don't see in some of those southern states you're fascinated with.
I think that's true. Hopefully, we're just not going to talk about the South. We'll talk about the whole country. But there is something going on in the country. Hindsight is always 20/20. When you can look 20 years past, you can start figuring out, way back then what was happening and why it was happening. But it is absolutely changing right now. This country is really struggling to find herself again. And you have these things going on that are just not easily explainable between hard red and hard blue. It's just not. The country's really kind of figuring out, are they right, left? Are they middle? Are they independents? For example, in North Carolina, I think 40% is Republican, 40% is self-professed Democrat. The other 38% are not, they call themselves non-affiliated, which means that they don't want to have anything to do with any of the other folks. That's a different thing than we used to have. So we're just trying to explore that. We're trying to have an open mind, trying to listen to everybody, and then just kind of let people know what we're hearing and what we're seeing.
Mitch, 30 seconds. How much sentiment, if any, do you pick up for Democratic Socialists of America on your journeys?
Not a whole lot. Not middle America. I think people care about health care. I think they think about cost. I think they think about education. I think they want their kids to have a better life than they had. All the candidates who are talking about that are the people who are going to win in this upcoming election cycle. And I think that's going to kind of push into 2028. And then, of course, into 2030, because of the Calais decision, that reapportionment thing is going to change everything. We don't fully understand that yet because people haven't seen it, but that's going to be a cataclysmic event for politics in the country.
The YouTube series Long Play, Winning the South. Mitch Landrieu, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Major. Appreciate it.
Before his death, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham was the focus of Alex Holder's documentary called Lindsey's Game. We'll show you some of the never-before-seen footage and speak with Holder about what he learned about the late senator. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. Documentary filmmaker Alex Holder, who spent the last few years following Lindsey Graham, is sharing with us and others behind-the-scenes videos of his time recording the late South Carolina Republican senator. Here is one of them showing Graham on a call with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Hey, Bibi, Lindsey.
Hey, Lindsey. How are you?
I'm just so impressed. Glad to be your friend.
I'm glad you are my friend.
I'm going to meet with the president this weekend. I'm going down to Doral. I'm going to try to get him to join with y'all in Lebanon, to maybe fly some with you.
I'm joined now by Alex Holder for more on his time filming with Senator Graham. And Alex heard about the tavern, said, hey, can I have a drink in the Conversation Corner? I said, Alex, of course you can have a drink in the Conversation Corner. So drink up, enjoy it. I want to play for my audience another soundbite, which I think is really important. It's right after the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran is launched. And here's Graham, and you're with him. Let's play it.
Look what we've done here.
I know.
I almost cried.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how long have we been pushing this?
Well, I mean, you've been pushing this for years, right?
Right. It's here. I talked to Trump this morning.
It's literally.
Oh, he's jacked.
Yeah.
It's the best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up. So, you know, there are a lot of people inside didn't want to do it. So I've had my challenges.
What did that encounter there tell you, Alex?
Well, it was a pretty extraordinary moment. I mean, the access that we got on this project was unparalleled. And, you know, there'll be days where we'll be in his office filming and not many things will happen. And then on some days, we'll get a moment where he is, you know, getting a phone call from the Israeli Prime Minister or remarking on, you know, the initial bombing campaign against Iran. This was the culmination of basically, I mean, decades of him pushing to, in his words, eradicate the mothership of terror. I mean, he was really pushing on this Iran campaign. And, you know, Trump then launched these bombing strikes. And, you know, Senator Graham was very, very overjoyed, let's say.
And I want to play something that also comes from your behind-the-scenes access, where in this moment of confronting Iran, Graham compares Trump and Bibi Netanyahu to other historical figures. Let's listen.
I said last night that Trump and Bibi are like Roosevelt and Churchill. I mean, they're the right two guys to confront this evil.
Alex, that suggests that Graham perceived that this ultimately would result in the defeat of Iran.
Yeah.
That's not where we are now.
No.
And there were times, I understand, where he expressed some misgivings to you about directionality of where this was all heading.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he really was very gung-ho at the start. He thought that President Trump was going to prosecute this war in line with his thinking, i.e. Senator Graham's thinking.
Meaning regime change.
Absolutely, yeah. Regime change, you know, it will all be
crush
over.
What was of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and remake Iran, thereby remake the region.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was all going to take about 3 weeks or so in his estimation. Obviously, that hasn't been the case. He was getting very frustrated with the way the war was being prosecuted by President Trump, and he was pushing back, I think, against a lot of others in the administration that were cautioning, you know, to pause or to allow, you know, the diplomatic efforts to work out. So, yeah, he was struggling with that over the few weeks once the war started. Absolutely.
What's your takeaway of who Lindsey Graham was based on all this close-up observation?
I think, look, we were with him for 4.5 years. So there was, you know, a real broad amount of, you know, geopolitical events that were taking place during this time. Ukraine, Russia, the Israel-Gaza war. You know, he was trying to build a peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and then obviously the Iran war itself. I think he had a enormous impact in geopolitical issues, far more than people actually think. I think in some respects, what this documentary will show, it will prove the oversized impact that he had. It will also show the enormous respect that world leaders had with him. You know, I was in the room with him and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and you see the deference that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has to a US senator, specifically Lindsey Graham, which was fascinating to see. And I think in some respects, he also didn't realize, or sometimes he would say how he doesn't really understand why he gets that kind of respect. You know, he's the senator from South Carolina, but he did build these relationships over a period of time. So he was a very, very consequential, complicated, controversial person.
And very quickly, it wasn't just because he was good friends with Trump. He created something on his own.
Oh, yeah. He did stuff under the Biden administration as well. Yeah.
Alex Holder, great to have you with you. Important stuff. I appreciate you sharing them with us. Please enjoy the scotch.
Thank you very much.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever, and yeah, the scotch is free. Day Report, coming your way next.